All right, so today is our last official lesson of new material. On Thursday, you're going to have just a short quiz on what we just did over the last 3 days with solving equations, combining like terms, and then solving inequalities, which is what we're going to do today. So that you'll notice that this is going to be fairly similar to what we did last week, just with a little bit of a change here. All right, and that change is going to be the symbol right there. Okay, so that symbol is less than, so it means numbers that are smaller than, and the other way is greater than. Okay, the one way I always remember it is that less than kind of looks like an L, and it starts with L, less than, so that's one way to help differentiate between the two. And then there's another one that has that little line underneath it, which means less than or equal to. So that means the number can either be smaller than or it could be that same number. And then on the right side, that's just greater than or equal to. So that means we're looking for numbers that are either more than or greater than the number that we're given, or possibly equal to that number. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we are going to graph on a number line. Okay, so this one right here says x is less than 2. So we don't want to include 2. So what we're going to do is on 2, we're going to put an open circle. So an open circle means not including. And then we want numbers that are smaller than or less than 2. So that means we don't want numbers like 3. We want numbers to the left. So we're just going to kind of color to the left, throw an arrow at the end. And all of those numbers to the left are numbers less than 2. So if we look at the graph on the right, that says x is greater than 2. Okay, so again, we don't want to include 2 because it's not greater than or equal to, so we put an open circle on 2. And now I don't want numbers like 1 and 0, I want numbers like 3, so we're going to shade to the numbers that are greater than 2, which in this case would be to the right. All right, this next one says x is less than or equal to 2. So we want to include 2 this time. So we're going to put a colored dot, which shows that we're including 2. And then we want to shade to all the numbers that are smaller than 2, which is going to be to the left. Throw an arrow on the end there. So all of those numbers that we've colored in, including that 2, are included. So numbers that are either 2 or less. And then the last one is x is greater than or equal to 2. So again, we want to include 2 this time, so we put a colored in circle there. And then we want numbers that are bigger than or greater than 2, so we're going to draw that arrow going to the right. Numbers like 3, 4, 5. Oops, not a very good arrow. Numbers to the right. All right, so the most important thing that we need to remember when we're solving is that solving inequalities is the same as solving equations, except when you multiply or divide by a negative number, you must flip the inequality sign. Okay, so that means if it started as a greater than, you're going to flip it, and now it's going to become less than. So if you multiply or divide by a negative, not if you add or subtract, just if you multiply or divide. Okay, so let's do some examples, and then we're also going to graph our answers on a number line. So if we look at example A, we're just going to solve this as if it was an equation. So that means we got to move that 3 to the other side. So I'm going to subtract 3. Notice we didn't add or we didn't multiply or divide. So I'm going to keep the sign the same way it is. So my 3's go away and I get x is less than 1. So I'm not including that one because there's no line underneath it. So if I want x is less than 1, I want all x values that are less than 1. We're going to put an open circle on 1. And less than would be numbers like 0, -1. So we're going to shade to the left. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward. Those were pretty easy equation, or that one was a pretty easy equation to solve. If we look at letter B, we've got x divided by -1, so we need to get rid of that -1, and the opposite of dividing is to multiply, so we're going to multiply both sides by -1. So remember, the rule is if you multiply or divide by a negative, well, we just multiplied by a -1, we've got to flip that sign. So on the left side, when we multiply by a -1, those -1s go away, so we just get x, and then 2 times -1 is -2. So now we want x is greater than or equal to -2. So again, I'm going to color in that circle because the or equal to part. And we want numbers that are bigger than -2. So -1, 0, 1, 2, all those numbers. So now we're going to shade to the right. All right, letter C is getting a little bit harder because there's more steps. So again, we want to get the letters on one side, the numbers on the other side. So we need to move that 3 over to the other side, just like we did in our last couple lessons. So we're going to add 3 to both sides. So I get 2x is greater than 4. We got to get x by itself. Since we have multiplication, we're going to divide. So I'm dividing by 2. 2 is not a negative number, so I don't have to worry about flipping the sign, because remember, it's if you multiply or divide by a negative, but we just divided by 2. So it's going to stay greater than, so I get x is greater than 2. So when I go to graph it, it's going to be an open circle on 2, and I want numbers that are greater, so that would be like 3, 4, 5. So I'm going to shade or color to the right and put my arrow there. All right, just like we did in our last lesson, if you have like terms on one side, you've got to combine them first. So here I get -2x plus 3x, which just gives me 1x, is less than or equal to -1. And all I had to do there is I just had to combine like terms. So we're done. X is less than or equal to -1. So since it's less than or equal, we've got to color in the circle. And less than would be numbers to the left, like -2 and -3. So it's just an arrow to the right. And again, as I mentioned in the notes the day before, if when you combine that you get 1x is less than or equal to -1, you could end up dividing both sides by 1, but you're still going to get the exact same answer as I did up there. All right, letter E, again, combine like terms on each side. So here I've got a +4 and a -2, so that gives me 2x plus 3 is less than or equal to, here there's no like term, so it's just 5x minus 6. And the rules, remember, are to get the variables on one side. So I need to move that 5x over by subtraction. So that gives me -3x plus 3 is less than or equal to -6. Now I've got to move the numbers to the right. So that's -3 minus 3. That gives me -3x is less than or equal to -9. Again, use your calculator with positives and negatives if you need to. My last step, since this is multiplication, is to divide both sides by -3. And remember, I just divided by a negative, so that means I need to flip my sign. So I get x is equal to positive, or greater than or equal to +3. Okay, my number line isn't quite big enough, but I'm going to color in that circle 3. Notice to the right would be 4 and 5, and then 2, 1, 0 are to the left. I want to go greater than -3, so that means my arrow is going to have to go to the right. All right, last one for today. I've got some parentheses, so my first step is to distribute. So I get -2 plus 4x is greater than 5x plus 5. So I've got to do the distributing part. I don't have any like terms because I just have a -2 and a 4x, and then a 5x and a 5. So I want to get the variables on one side. So I want to move that 5 to the left. So -5x, -5x, which gives me -2 in front. Oops, minus x, or -1x you could do as well. I'm going to go ahead and throw that -1 in there, is greater than 5. Okay, I want to move that 2 to the other side, but it's a -2, so that means I've got to do +2. So when I move that +2 to the other side, I get -1x is greater than 7. And then my last step is to divide both sides by -1. And remember, I divided by a negative, so I've got to flip my sign. And I get x is less than -7. So I'm going to have a problem here because my number line doesn't have the right numbers. But to make a number line, I can just put the -7 right there in the middle, go to -8, -9, that would be to the left, and then -6 and -5 to the right. So I'm going to go ahead and put an open circle on -7, because remember, we're not including -7, and I want numbers smaller, and that's going to be numbers to the left. All right, so that is the lesson for today. So your homework is a worksheet again, so go ahead and work on that worksheet. Go back and make up any other missing assignments, because we are done at the end of this week, which is crazy to think, but if you've been missing any quizzes or tests, make sure you email me so that I can reassign those to you, so that you can earn credit for the semester. Thanks and have a great day.